all. This is Dr. Mubin Sayed. Welcome to one more show. So today with us is our own Paul Bork. Paul, take it away.
Thank you very much, Drbeen. So we're talking about some of the COVID stats, and we're having the CDC, the UK, and the world seems to be going crazy over this new variant that's coming out. And I was able to find some information this morning, and Mubin allowed me to come on to share some of that with you. And so that's where we are. First, the new name that they're giving this one, it was named after an asteroid. It was an asteroid that was found in 1927. It's between 2.6 and 3.7 times the distance between the sun and the Earth, so it is way out there. And it is 2 degrees with respect to the ecliptic, so it goes up and down relative to where the Earth is. So the chances of it actually hitting us, unless someone goes out and pushes it, is pretty small. One could wonder if that had something to do with the name that they picked to be something that is not likely to cause any trouble with people. So I suspect that probably isn't why they picked it, but that's interesting. I just want to let you know. There are no pictures of it, but they see how the light changes and they think it's rotating. And so from that, they have constructed this image. This is all from Wikipedia.
So, Paul, just so you know, while you are teaching, presenting, discussing, I am eating cookies and interacting with the cool beans. This is the best day of my working days. So thank you very much. Okay, so I think there is something going on with the network today. My question to the cool beans, are you able to hear me, Paul? Your device is disconnected, but your presentation is connected. Cool beans, can you hear me? So while Paul is reconnecting, we can have some songs. Okay, so Colombian says that I'm okay. So looks like I am presenting. I was thinking, is it me or is it Paul's network? So it seems like Paul's network may be a little in trouble. So anyways, that allows us to do side talks while Paul comes back. So here is Paul. So Paul, we have confirmed that this may be you because my audio video has been continuing since then with the cool beans.
Okay, well, very good. I'll try to reconnect and hopefully we don't continue to have problems with that.
Excellent. So back to you.
Okay, and this is the Wikipedia page on the BA 2.86. And as of August 30th, there were was like 24 cases of this that have been found. They think some of the cases, some of the reason that people are suggesting that they're responding the way they are is that their cases are showing up in different places. But I do note that the story said that one of the U.S. cases that was found in Virginia actually was a person returning from Japan who was asymptomatic, and apparently they were just monitoring people coming in, doing swabs or something. So that was a case. So at least some of what they thought was in the U.S. really wasn't in the U.S. And so again, the response that they're having seems inappropriate to some. And so they're sort of going crazy over so very few cases. And part of the problem may be that they shut down their monitoring, and so they don't really know what's going on. And if you've gone to 1/100th or 1/1000th of the monitoring and suddenly you get surprised that you didn't detect it early, that doesn't mean that BA 2.86 is different. It may just be that you shut down the monitoring. I'm not trying to say that monitoring shouldn't have been shut down, but to say suddenly you're all excited, but it probably is self-inflicted rather than something inherent with the BA 2.86.
Got it. And there is a question from Kim. Question, how did they predict this new variant was coming out now? Heard about it a few months ago.
They did not predict that it was coming out No, well, I don't know what prediction you're talking about. I was very certain that there was going to be a new variant coming out, because if you look at the, we're going to see this later, but if you look at what the CDC is showing for the variants in the US, there's a bunch of different variants. And so it's a competition where nothing is dominating, and it's sort of waiting for someone to be a little bit faster and a little bit more dominant in whatever reason, and to dominate the way that most of this year we've been dominated by one or another variant, and now we have a bunch of them. And if you were sitting there looking at it, you'd say, well, it's about time for one person to step up. And as Movina said, this is constantly migrating to become more and more human compatible, because it's competing. If it isn't better than the last one, it has no chance of going forward. So if we had a spaceship that took off and it came back with Delta right now, there would be no risk to Delta at all, because Omicron is so much more dominant, it would just squish it. Okay, and so as each one comes out, it has to get more and more and more. And so the question is, as it's doing that and being able to compete with all these other ones, and the genetic structure is migrating to compete, is it going to also migrate and become more lethal, more virulent? Is it going to change the direction, or are we going to have conservation that if it has to run twice as hard just to stay where it was in competition, is that going to be the only place where we get variation, in which case we see the disease staying roughly the same or becoming even less, which is what we've seen for this last year. So I don't know that anyone was predicting it. And this says here, I don't know if they have the first case. I think the first, yeah, it was designated as a variant on August 17th by the World Health Organization. So it probably wasn't very well known, and certainly no one was predicting that this was going to be a world changer before the 17th of August. And even the World Health Organization has not said that this is a variant of concern yet. They're just monitoring it. So I hope that answered the question.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I am having fun with the cool beans.
Okay.
Koda, thank you very much.
And why can't I go to the next slide? Oh, probably because I'm in the wrong place. Okay. Okay, now the reason that we came up with it is, let me come down just a little here. See these two right here? These are all in the BA2 on the next strain, but these two are the BA228 because they don't differentiate as much in the next strain as the others. And so these two analyses right here are the reasons that we're doing it. So now I'll go back and show you some of the analysis that they had with it. And there's all kinds of information here. And I've got, this is one of the, see, this is BA2. This is the 2.28, as it indicates right there. And let's take a look at some of the effects to see what's going on. I mean, the frequency just is how much it shows up. It's got 50 mutations, but immune escape they're measuring against BA2. Now, is this a perfect measure of escape? No, but it's the measure that they're using. And we've seen it before, and it's roughly 20% more immune escape than the BA2 initial variant had. And we've seen this number go up to, I think, about 4 or 5 with some of the Omicron. So the immune escape, this should be nothing outside of what we've seen before. And if you look here, this, I just picked some of the prior ones to take a look at. And the other two here are not the BA 2.28. This is, where is it? This is the XB 1.15, and this is the 1.16. So again, these are two. I just picked two of the variants that we had just to show these numbers. And the ACE2 binding is 1.05. So it's actually binding the same way as the first BA2 did. If we look over here, this one was a negative, and the one over here, 0.86. So again, I don't think either the binding or the immune escape are anything that we haven't seen before. And then they have this thing that's called mutational fitness. which there's a long definition I'll get into a bit later, but it's basically a test they set up to try to show how effective the mutation or the mutation class, because remember, we talk about BA 2.86 is not just one mutation, it's a whole class that has minor mutations. They call it the same thing, and it's not. And there's always mutations going on inside any person that's infected, and certainly the group of people, the 10 people or 16 people they found, they're having mutations in different ones as they go forward. But the mutation fitness is just trying to say, how well do they think that this particular mutation class can be a basis for future mutation? You know, how many of the mutations do they think might interfere with the virus's ability to operate itself? And this one is 2.99. We had 3.4 and 3.85. So this is indicating that this particular test is showing that this BA 2.28 is not going to be around very long, not as long as the other ones were. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Here are all the mutations. So if you want to, if you have something that you know that there's a certain mutation that's of concern or is interesting, they've got the whole thing set up here. Those are all the mutations we have. And when we get to another reason why they might be concerned, and this is the second BA 2.86 that we saw, the two. And again, this one is 1.2, 1.05, and 2.99. And the fact that these numbers are different is telling you that the mutation is such that these two sequenced are having different effects. They're different. They're different viruses. They have a different ability to do things. They're just being grouped together into things that we happen to just label, because we're calling it all SARS-CoV-2. Some people might have said we should have had a 3 before. Perhaps we should have, but then it's a BA2. It's a BA group. Then it's a BA2 group. And then it's a BA 2.86, and it's just arbitrarily grouping these things together in ways that we think are helpful or consistent. And there again is the list of it, and you can compare one to the other, and you can go on to the nextstrain.com, find those two dots, and go ahead and look at them as much as you like. This is a paper. There's the URL for it. It was published, that talks about what this fitness of the mutation test actually is and how they did it and what factors they included. And my quick read of this summary, I did not read the whole paper, is that what they're trying to do is to figure out how stable the or how unstable the variant class is, so that do they think it's just going to fall apart later as it goes forward, or will it be the mother of more daughters that will mutate going forward? I'm not sure that the test really is any good, but again, that was something that you could look at and decide whether you think this makes it a more dangerous or less dangerous variant. And if you or I were running a national health organization, we might decide whether we're going to push the vaccine program forward, move it back, move it forward, and people have to make a guess. And obviously, none of the vaccines are using this BA 2.86. They're using the one that now has lots of variations. So it's probably going to be less effective than it was if they had given it a month ago. Okay. Yeah, that's the same asterisk. Now here is I took the little slope out, and as you can see, the slope is the same as what we've had before, all these different directions to go, okay, where it's pretty flat, and we're not seeing a sudden leap up. And see that little circle there? That little circle there is in exactly the same place as a circle here, where I told it, only show me the BA2s. So if you're looking for these two, you're not going to be able to find it there in the mix because it's buried. But if you go and ask it to screen everything out, but only show me the BA2, you can then find these two little dots. And when you click on them, then you can open up the screen that will show you the things that I showed you, those 2 pages. And you can see all the mutations that they had from the fairly random first sequence Wuhan variant. And that was a variant because it was just one virus that was sequenced. It wasn't a whole group of them, but we had the migration going forward from there. We had the we had the mutations go forward, and they were called they didn't call it Wuhan at the time because they just called it SARS-CoV-2. But then when they had something else to differentiate it from, they called it the original, or as medical history normally is, you name it after the first location. And part of the reason is not to stigmatize, but to allow the collection of all the information together, because you look at the first place it showed up, and that's where you're going to find it. Someone says, oh, this came from Chicago. Okay, you go look for Chicago, because that's where that illness is going to be found, because it's going to be named later and they don't go back and rename it. So anyway, but we decided that we don't want to do that anymore. I guess the WHO is working on that. So now jumping forward, this is what I had shown you before, and it is continuing now. A couple of weeks later, you can see we have essentially 5 different variants that are increasing. Now, one can argue that this forecast for the pink is showing that it's decreasing, but that's just guess. If we look at the data that we have, which is a month old because of the way they're reporting it roughly, we have 5, you could argue maybe 4, that are all increasing at once. And so we have a mixed playing field. And so if this BA 2.86 comes in, and it can compete very readily against the this one, the EG5, it may grow well, and then once it has the EG5 space, it may not grow anymore. So when we had the XBB 1.5 as the dominant, whoever came in just had to compete against that. And so again, the playing field is different. And if you want to take a look at this slide for a second, I'll be quiet after I tell you that the arrowhead is pointing to the color, and the base is where they put the number. And so you can look at the prevalence that they have. And this prevalence is their month in the future forecast, or their nowcast, as they say. But I don't like the way they've done it, because you can't very easily even get the name of some of these, let alone what the fraction is. So I've drawn the arrow up to show you, and you can look and see these ones that are growing where they actually are.
Thank you very much for doing that homework.
You're welcome. And we can see here that the CDC also reported that there's an 18.8% increase in hospitalizations, and the trend in death is up 17%. So they're saying hospitalizations are up more than death. And I believe that we have been looking at something before where there was some confusion or difficulty in seeing where the deaths versus the hospitalizations were. Now let's go to the next CDC diagram, where they show the connection. Are these real connections? No, they're not real connections. They don't know. Nobody's watching. They just look at it and genetically say that must have come from here. And you can see that we have here the BA2 right here. Okay, so all these things are coming from BA2. So we now have a new BA2. Well, we've had the BA2 as all of the stuff coming out for quite some time. Okay, and this red arrow is mine, up and over. And this is where we're going to have the new one. And they're going to say it came from here. They might say it came from there or there, but it's not. They're going to say it didn't come from this. And you've heard the number of variations that they're talking about, but they also said there's a lot of variations, more variations with the XBB 1.5 than there are with the BA2. What that just means is some of the changes with the XB 115 aren't in this new one. So some of the changes that went off and made its own changes, and it's like this other one was starting from BA2 and was in some backwater or some place going on and not following the rest, and then just seemed to come out here. And so again, these are the 5 that we showed before, and they're all down on the part down here. Does this new one come from this direction? So it's all the same sort of thing where they may put it down here. I don't know. All I know is it's derived from the BA2. And so I just took it from this parent and brought it up to the top. So the slide didn't get all messed up with everything on top of each other.
Understood.
Now here's a slide that we looked at before where there was some confusion about what was happening with the deaths as the hospitalizations were going up.
Yeah, so my curiosity was that the percentage of deaths from out of hospitalized patients, is that percentage changed? For example, if the severity has increased, then the percentage of deaths would increase. And that is what I could not see yet.
Right. And you see that we have here, this is the weekly deaths where they're saying they're making a forecast. And over here, we have the weekly new hospital. And so the hospitalization is going up and we aren't having the deaths. But if we move to the next slide here, this one is the weekly deaths versus, wait a second, versus the percentage of deaths. And you can wonder, how is it if they don't know how many people died, they know what the percentage of the deaths in the US are from COVID? You would think you'd have to know how many people died of COVID before you could calculate what percentage of people died from COVID. But apparently the CDC has a way of doing that without the information. So they're showing that the percentage of US deaths according to COVID is now up to 2%. And it was down in the 1% range. So it doubled over this last little period. I cut this off on January. So this is just showing this year, all my slides.
Is that, so Paul, is that the deaths out of all the deaths?
Yes.
Or is that the death out of all the COVID cases?
It says percentage of deaths due to COVID. So I think that's not the percentage of people who got sick, because how would they know who got sick?
Correct. So here is how I process this. If they are saying that the percentage of COVID deaths have increased out of all the deaths, that simply means that the cases are more as well, and unfortunately more people would die too. But that doesn't mean that the intensity of the virus has increased, because if that has increased, then the percentage out of hospitalized would increase.
Right. And so, and if you look at the increase, we'll get to this. We'll get to this part here. Let me jump to the next slide. Here, I've got one that shows the data. This is the weekly hospital admissions versus the death percentage. And this is showing just what you're saying. If anything, it's a little lower than it was. But if it was actually the new variant that first, let me say, we have 8 cases that they know of. So even if it was killing everybody who got infected, and it's not, then this number wouldn't move. There's just not enough people sick. We can't measure it on the population numbers yet until a whole bunch of people get sick. Unfortunately, you can't do it. And the CDC numbers that we had before here, these are misleading because this is talking about new cases. And we know if people are sick for 2 weeks, you could have 100% with the new variant, and day one, you've got essentially 0% of the people who are sick. And if people die normally, on average, 2 weeks after they get sick, you've got this delay effect. And so when a new variant comes in, it takes a long, long time to be able to look at population numbers to see what's going on.
Got it. Thank you very much. And by the way, your camera has become disconnected. Still, we can hear you and interact with you, and it's okay, but just FYI.
Okay, well,
I don't want to mess up the rest, so
okay.
You can.
I will continue then. You don't have to see my face anyway. So, okay. Now, one of the things that somebody might do is show you this graph that shows the age-adjusted death rate versus the total number of cases, and say, oh my gosh, look, we've gone from 1 down to about 0.2. So we've had an 80% decrease in the deaths. Well, this is not a correct measurement because this is the total number of cases. And what you need to be comparing it against is not how many cases you've had before, because remember, this number, that's all on the far side of the graph. It has nothing to do with what's occurring now. So if we go and we take a look at hospitalizations versus this, you can see it looks like we really haven't done very much at all. And so we essentially have the death rate and the hospitalization rate running about the same. We expect to have some lag in it. If we've gone back looking over time, there doesn't appear to be much of a lag, but we're seeming to have hospitalizations going up, and now we have dotted lines here where before we were able to jump up to get the 2%. So we know what the percentage is, but we don't know the age-adjusted death rate per 100,000, but we do know the percentage. So is that the age adjustment that's taking the time? Maybe I'm not being fair to the CDC and understanding what they're doing, but I'm seeing that this shows that there doesn't appear to be much of a change that's occurring. And certainly there's no doubling of the death rate or having it drop in half or anything that would get us excited. And again, it's way too soon to see anything in the population data.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, now let's jump to the only relevant data that we have for incident rates, and that's the UK. And you see their number is continuing to come up. And again, if you have an exponential curve, it'll be, maybe we've hit about where it's going to flatten out. But I drew this line to show the cases now look like they're coming up. And if you look at this little piece, you can say, oh, something's happening. But look how infrequently the number of cases have been that low in the past. Almost never. It's as good as it gets. And yeah, it's increasing. You prefer not to, but things are pretty much in good shape. So if we're running a national or a regional or a county or city health organization with something like this, it's not time to run out and change what you're doing. Things are doing pretty well.
Hey, alive in heels. Long time no see.
And that's pretty much. You asked me to take a look to see if Paul Merrick's case has been decided. It has not. I think it would take quite some time, but there's nothing on the Fifth Circuit to show that that's been decided.
Got it. Thank you very much. I was curious. So thank you for looking it up. Thank you for all the homework. And exactly on the dot at 6:30. So you are just so tremendous. And I am seeing Rima after a long time. So Rima, welcome. And with this, Cool Beans, thank you very much. Study for FLCCC today. It is the hypertension increased prevalence after vaccination. So one of the studies showed that, so even COVID can cause hypertension. It's a spike protein, but the vaccines cause 2% of the people vaccinated develop new hypertension, more than those who are not, and 8% develop higher blood pressure, not enough to be called hypertension, but still higher blood pressure, and 11% of existing hypertensive patients who got vaccines had their hypertension intensified, and they needed to have more dose of the antihypertensives. So I talked about the mechanism and those studies. I just did that today. It is fascinating. So anyways, Paul, thank you very much.
You're welcome. I'll have to take a look at the FLCCC. I think I've looked at that paper before, and that's
Yes.
Not an overwhelming effect, but a very significant effect, particularly given how significant the underlying health and ongoing diseases are for the U.S. and the world.
Correct. And we did discuss that for the supporting beans in our Zoom sessions yesterday. So with this, Cool Beans, thank you very much for being here and listening in. Welcome to Rima after a long time. Welcome to Alex as well after a long time. And Paul, thank you very much for your homework and presentation. See you all tomorrow.
Bye.